Hi, I'm Scott, and in this video, I'm going to talk about extra topicality and why I think a lot of LARP Affs on the LD space topic are probably extra topical. So, what is extra topicality? Pretty simply put, extra topicality is a topicality argument that argues that the affirmative, via their defense of the resolution via the plan text or something like that, adds an element to the resolution that is not in the resolution. So, again, extra topicality is going to be the affirmative adds an element to their plan or to the resolution that is not in the wording of the topic. If anybody is familiar with how intrinsicness works or how intrinsic permutations work, the way in which extra topicality works, in my opinion, is really similar to how those permutation arguments function in debates, because they just say we should add something that is tangentially or not related to the topic or resolution and defend that in the debate. So an example of this would be, let's say if we had an affirmative topic that said Scott should eat fast food. An extra topical affirmative would say Scott should only eat fast food on days upon which he works out. So that might be an example of an extra topical affirmative. Another example, maybe specific to this resolution, would be, let's say you have an affirmative that does like a code of conduct, says that states or private entities should engage in some type of code of conduct to regulate their appropriation of outer space. That code of conduct is probably not topical. Now you could say it affects topical, but that code of conduct itself isn't a part of the topic. That is a part that is in addition to the topic that the affirmative adds in to the topic. So that is the general idea of what extra topicality is. Extra topicality is an argument that says you have added something that is not in the topic text to the topic, and that is unfair, essentially, because it would allow you to add anything that you wish to the debate resolution. So, before I get into sort of how extra topicality works, what the different arguments people make against or for extra topicality are, I want to talk about kind of why I think that this has the potential to be a really interesting argument on the space topic. So if we go to the actual space resolution, it says the appropriation of outer space by private entities is unjust. I think that this resolution is very different from a lot of past resolutions that we've had, and very specifically affects a lot of the LARP teams, because in my opinion, this is not a resolution that is a question of policy, but is a question of value in the debate. So in a value debate, there's no actor for this resolution. So what I'm essentially getting at here is I think affirmatives that add an actor to the topic have the potential to be extra topical, and also just Affs that do an action by an institutional actor, albeit all LARP Affs, may, depending on how they word things, may be extra topical on this topic because this value resolution does not have an actor that the affirmative team is defending, but a lot of affirmative teams have just imposed a actor on this resolution. So I've grouped sort of these examples into three categories. I just went to the wiki. I looked at teams that had a plan text that were in quarters or better at tournaments that have happened on this topic already. And I kind of want to take you through how I kind of got to thinking of this stage. So the first set of resolutions that I have are ones that defend states as an actor. So a lot of these are the public trust doctrine affirmatives. You notice these are all the public trust doctrine affirmative. I thought that it kind of warranted its own page just because it seemed like a lot of teams are reading this affirmative, and also because it's a great example of the argument that I'm talking about here, where states expanding the public trust doctrine or applying the principles of the public trust doctrine. If we go back to the topic, I don't understand how the state action or the states working in conjunction with one another would be something that this value resolution forces the affirmative to defend, and that the institutional action taken by those states might actually be an extra topical action on this topic, because the appropriation of space, of outer space, by private entities being unjust doesn't require an institution to like structurally affirm that statement and do something about it through solving something in order to prove this statement true. So I think that this is maybe a pretty good example of what I'm talking about, where they kind of add the institutional component onto this. I think maybe this is because we've had a lot of topics that have been worded in this way. I'm not sure. But just, something to definitely think about. I kind of personally think that this might be extra T. I'm not sure what to do about that, but probably extra topical. Second sort of more specific example of this is two different affirmatives that defended an actual country should do something. So the United States should end commercial tourism, or the People's Republic of China should ban their private entities from outer space. I think that this is just a more specific example of the last thing that I was talking about, where I don't think that these affirmatives necessarily fall underneath of the topic, in the sense that they probably cover more than the topic, because the topic doesn't require that you have to resolve the justice of private entities' appropriation. So I think that these are some pretty good examples of, if we really thought about this, probably extra topical. Now, does this mean all LARP Affs are probably extra topical? No. I think that there's probably some really good examples of some other ones that might be. So the Global Commons affirmative, I think, if worded properly, is a pretty good example of this, where if you would recognize outer space as a global commons, now this doesn't necessarily decrease appropriation. There's maybe an effects T debate here, lots of other things, but from the I don't think that this plan text is necessarily as extra topical as the other ones are. The other thing that you have to think about is in the second text, it's kind of interesting because the text itself isn't necessarily extra topical, but they kind of defend a normal means mechanism that is. So I think that these are some examples, some things to think about as to how, maybe some of these affirmatives that are really popular that people are running on the topic might actually be extra T, just because people want to defend an actor because that's what LARP teams do, but it's not necessarily what this resolution justifies. It's also really interesting to me, given that a lot of these style of teams read framework against teams who do extra topical things when they defend a method or some type of, critical alternative in their affirmative. So I don't know, kind of an interesting take there. But the main thing here is that, all right, Scott, they're extra T. What do I do with this? And really, my answer to you is that all the same things that you would say against extra T, or that you would say for extra T, would still matter or would still apply in this same debate. So all of the same arguments that you would typically make against extra T, like they destroy our ground because we have no idea what they're going to say in the debate, so we don't know what to predict of those things. Probably a predictable ground argument, might be predictability and ground, and you can make a delineation between those things. I think there's also a pretty good argument as to this might prove the resolution insufficient because it proves that it needs additional things in order for the affirmative to work. The other thing is that normally affirmatives that add things in do it because they're trying to counteract things that the negative is going to say in the debate. So if we have an affirmative that says Scott should eat fast food, the DA to that is obviously that it's going to be unhealthy. So an extra topical component to that might be that I only get to eat fast food in the affirmatives world on days that I work out. And the negative would say, well, that destroys our ground in the debate because we can no longer read the Scott becomes unhealthy from eating fast food DA, and that destroys sort of the predictable ground that we had in the debate. So I think that these are some good arguments to make against extra T, but the biggest argument, and I think one that these affirmatives are going to have problems answering, is most teams in these extra T debates, when faced with extra T, just say, get rid of the extra T parts, keep the T parts, don't vote against us, don't drop the debater, just drop the little specific arguments that are extra T. I'm not sure that this works with this style of affirmative because that would mean the entire AF is not T because the solvency mechanism that they have wouldn't work. Obviously, Affs can still say the same things against extra T. So they're going to say you have more ground. Extra T's inevitable, which is probably one of the best arguments against it. Reject the extra topical parts of the AF. All of these arguments are still super valid, good arguments to say if you hit this extra topical space AFs, LARP AFs aren't T argument. But, I think that this is definitely something that maybe you could change your plan text for. Maybe you could just think about how you're going to answer this a little better, because I think that there is definitely the potential that, at least half of the LARP AFs that have been read on the Space LD topic thus far are just definitely extra T, in my opinion. So hopefully this is helpful. Hopefully this sort of let you think a little bit more about some different aspects to the topic, and I'll see you next time. Bye.